In recent years, Mexican cartels have grown increasingly ruthless, targeting U.S. veterans. From Nicholas Quetz, a U.S. Marine Corps veteran gunned down for no reason near a gas station in Mexico, to Jesus Macias, shot dead on a Mexican highway right in front of his wife and young kids. Here are 15 U.S. Army veterans murdered on camera by Mexican drug cartels in some of the most brutal ways imaginable. Let's dive in. Nicholas Quetz. On October 18, 2020, Nicholas Quetz, a 31-year-old U.S. Marine Corps veteran from Arizona, was tragically shot and murdered by gunmen working for a Mexican drug cartel. The incident occurred near a gas station between Altar and Caborca in the northern Mexican state of Sonora, as Quetz was traveling to the beach resort town of Puerto Penasco, also known as Rocky Point. Reports suggested that his vehicle may have passed through a cartel-controlled checkpoint just before the attack. Quetz's family, speaking to CBS affiliate Cold TV, described him as a protector with a wide circle of friends due to his caring nature. He wouldn't even hurt a flea that would cause harm to someone else, his father Doug shared, mourning the loss of a son who had a deep impact on those around him. Local authorities in Sonora later revealed that one of the alleged killers was a deserter from the Honduran Presidential Honor Guard. The suspect, along with a companion, was reportedly neutralized by Mexican security forces after opening fire on them in the town of Altar. The suspect was wanted for desertion, and drug cartels in Mexico often recruit former soldiers from Central and South America. In addition, authorities arrested 2 other individuals tied to Quetz's killing, one of whom was affiliated with a faction of the Sinaloa cartel, known as Delta. In addition, Quetz had served in various countries, including Australia and Southeast Asia during his time in the military. His family expressed deep sorrow, noting the void left by his untimely death. In his memory, they set up a GoFundMe for a memorial scholarship to honor his legacy. Like Nicholas, Sisson was traveling to Mexico when he was suddenly shot without warning. Sisson Jason Thomas. In a terrifying incident in the border city of Caborca, Sonora, 2 Americans, including U.S. Army veteran Sisson Jason Thomas, was shot after being chased by armed men in vehicles. Local police, according to one of the survivors, did nothing to intervene during the attack. The victims, Robert Vance and Sisson, were returning from a holiday in Puerto Penasco when they were pursued by 2 vehicles with their lights off. As Vance, the driver, tried to escape, the gunman opened fire, hitting him in the process. Vance described the chilling moment to local media, revealing that local police officers initially seemed ready to pull them over for speeding. However, when they noticed the gunman in pursuit, the officers turned off their lights and sped away. "We were driving the wrong way and we found another officer on that side of the road, and he turned on his lights because of course we were breaking the rules of the road," Vance recalled. Moments later, the gunmen opened fire again, striking Sisson in the back of the shoulder and head. The veteran, severely injured, was rushed to Caborca General Hospital before being airlifted to Nogales, Arizona. After some time, Sisson died from the gunshots. On the other hand, Vance, shaken by the attack, urged others to avoid traveling through the area. The state prosecutor's office launched an investigation into the shooting, focusing on identifying the perpetrators and uncovering their motives. The Sonora prosecutor's office, together with security corporations, has deployed an operation to identify those responsible for the attack and determine its possible motive, officials said. "We will continue to report on the progress of the investigation, respecting due process." As the investigation continues, the incident highlights the growing danger in parts of Mexico controlled by drug cartels. Up next is Horacio Lopez Peña, who was murdered by a cartel-planted bomb on agricultural land. Horacio Lopez Peña, a 74-year-old Texas rancher and a U.S. Army veteran, Horacio Lopez Peña, were murdered, and a 3rd person injured when an improvised explosive device, allegedly planted by a Mexican drug cartel, detonated near the U.S.-Mexico border. The deadly blast occurred just south of Brownsville, Texas, in the Mexican state of Tamaulipas, a region known for cartel activity. The rancher, Antonio Cespedes Saldierna, who worked on both sides of the border, was driving when he unknowingly triggered the bomb. Antonio was killed instantly in the explosion, and Horacio Lopez Peña, who was with him, also died from the blast. Horacio's wife, Ninfa Griselda Ortega, sustained serious injuries and was taken to a nearby hospital for treatment. Sid Miller, the Texas Agriculture Commissioner, condemned the attack emphasizing the growing dangers posed by cartel violence along the southern border. This shocking act of violence highlights the growing threat posed by cartel activity along our southern border, Sid Miller continued. I urge all Texas farmers, ranchers, and agricultural workers who travel to Mexico or operate near the border to exercise extreme caution. Texas Land Commissioner Dawn Buckingham also spoke out, condemning the use of bombs by cartels and calling for stronger measures to address the violence. She stated, "Unfortunately, extreme violence, including the use of IEDs, has become more common over the last few years as cartels were emboldened by weak leadership in Washington, D.C." Dawn Buckingham stressed the need for greater security in South Texas to protect American citizens from the rising threat. Law enforcement in Tamaulipas had previously warned about the presence of bombs in the region, especially in agricultural areas, as criminal organizations escalate their operations. Unlike Horatio, this next U.S. veteran was killed alongside 3 Mexican cops, but that same day, another attack struck during the rescue operation. Unknown U.S. veteran. 3 Mexican police officers, including a U.S. Army veteran, were killed in a series of violent shootouts in Tamaulipas, Mexico, just across the Texas border. The attacks unfolded near the town of San Fernando, where cartel gunmen set up roadblocks and ambushed police patrols. The officers were met with heavy gunfire, leaving 3 dead and 5 others wounded. Later that day, as a funeral convoy transported the body of one of the fallen officers, cartel members struck again, launching a second attack on the mourners. Officials confirmed the deaths, but provided no immediate update on the condition of the injured officers. San Fernando has a long and bloody history with cartel violence. Between 2010 and 2011, it was the site of some of the most brutal massacres in Mexico's drug war. 72 migrants were executed in a single day, and over 120 bus passengers were kidnapped and forced to fight each other to the death with sledgehammers. Tamaulipas remains contested territory, largely controlled by the Gulf Cartel and the Cartel del Noreste, a faction of the once powerful Zetas cartel. The attacks in Tamaulipas were not isolated incidents. On the same day, in the border state of Sonora, cartel suspects ambushed law enforcement officers, killing a detective and injuring 2 others. The attack involved ramming a police vehicle before opening fire. A U.S. Marine was also wounded. Authorities reported that the suspects were driving with their headlights off on a rural road near Sasabe, west of Nogales, Arizona. When officers attempted to stop them, the suspects rammed 2 patrol vehicles and began shooting. Marines and detectives returned fire, killing 3 cartel members. Moving on, we have Jesus Macias, who was traveling with his family to visit his mother when he was suddenly shot on a Mexican highway. Jesus Macias. A family in Waukegan is demanding justice after their loved one was shot and killed in Mexico. On December 30th, 2024, Jesus Macias was driving along a highway in Zacatecas when he encountered an improvised checkpoint, not set up by police, but by cartel members. His family says he didn't stop. As a result, the gunman opened fire, killing him in front of his mother, wife, and young son. He was a father figure to me and many of us. He taught me so much, said his niece, Lucero Rivas. Jesus, a 62-year-old father of 5 from Rockford, was known as a hard-working police officer and man who loved his family, horse racing, and even mowing the grass on his John Deere. He had traveled to Mexico to visit his mother for the holidays, like so many others who cross the border each year. They had just picked up a stove as a gift from my grandmother, said his niece, Giselle Jimenez. In recent years, due to the rising violence on Mexican highways, the government has launched initiatives to protect travelers, even organizing large caravans to escort people safely to their hometowns. They were promised security traveling all the way to their places of origin, their pueblos, said Julie Contreras with United Giving Hope. But safety remains a growing concern. Just 3 days before Jesus' death, 2 Chicago area brothers were shot and killed in Mexico. On the other hand, Jesus' family is now calling for action. He was a really good man, a hard-working man, went and did his 9-to-5 job just like all American citizens do, and it's not fair that this is happening to him. Something needs to be done about it, Lucero Rivas said. Like Jesus, Gabriel Trujillo met a similar fate. Gabriel Trujillo's father. For 4 years, Gabriel Trujillo, a 31-year-old PhD student at the University of California, Berkeley, trekked across the United States and into Mexico on a mission to study the resilience of the common. Buttonbush. The plant's ability to thrive in varying climates intrigued Trujillo, and he hoped his research could help future conservation efforts. But tragedy struck in Mexico when Trujillo was found dead on June 22nd in the state of Sonora, just days after his fiancée reported him missing. He had crossed the border into Nogales, Arizona, and had had been last heard from on June 18th when he told his fiancée he was collecting plants. When he failed to respond to her calls, Cruz de Hoyos grew worried and flew to Mexico to search for him. Authorities discovered his body nearly 62 miles from his Airbnb. He had been shot 7 times. Despite his family's concerns, Trujillo had gone to Sonora to connect with his Opata indigenous roots and conduct his environmental research. The region, plagued by cartel violence, is notorious for its connection to drug trafficking, especially fentanyl, and its dangerous terrain. While the state has seen countless killings related to the drug trade, Trujillo was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time, according to his father, who was a former U.S. veteran. Trujillo's fiancé and father are now left seeking answers from both the U.S. and Mexican governments, but details remain scarce. Trujillo had been dedicated to environmental conservation, and his loss is felt deeply by his family, friends, and academic community. Up next, we have Enrique Camarena, who was murdered by the Mexican cartel. But what's shocking is that the FBI may have been involved in his death as well. Enrique Kiki Camarena. Enrique Kiki Camarena was an agent for the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration, whose tragic death in February 1985 became a watershed moment in the ongoing war on drugs. The case sent shockwaves through both U.S. and Mexican law enforcement and continues to strain relations between the two countries, especially with the controversial release and recapture of one of the key suspects, Rafael Caro Quintero. Camarena's investigation into drug trafficking led him to uncover significant ties between Mexican drug cartels and U.S. operations. In 1984, after the DEA provided intelligence, Mexican authorities destroyed a massive plantation known as Rancho Bufalo, which was linked to the cartel's operations. This action likely set off the chain of events that led to Camarena's abduction. On February 7, 1985, Camarena was snatched in broad daylight in Guadalajara. Alongside him, DEA informant Alfredo Zavala Avalar was also captured. The two men were taken to a house owned by Caro Quintero, where Camarena endured 30 hours of torture before being murdered. His body, along with Avalar's, was found weeks later, wrapped in plastic in a rural area of Michoacan. The murder prompted a massive response from the DEA, launching Operation Leyenda, the largest homicide investigation in its history. Through intense efforts, Mexican drug lords like Miguel Angel Felix Gallardo, Ernesto Fonseca Carrillo, and Caro Quintero were implicated. Despite political protection, Angel Felix Gallardo was arrested years later in 1989. Conspiracy theories about CIA involvement in Camarena's death persist, fueled by reports alleging that Camarena uncovered CIA ties to drug trafficking operations used to fund Nicaraguan Contras. Like Enrique, Jaime Zapata was killed in a brutal cartel operation. Jaime Zapata was a special agent for the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, working under Homeland Security investigations. On February 15, 2011, Zapata was tragically ambushed and murdered by the Mexican criminal group Los Zetas in San Luis Potosi, Mexico, while on assignment. His death marked the second high-profile killing of a U.S. agent in Mexico, echoing the infamous 1985 murder of DEA agent Enrique Camarena. Jamie, along with fellow agent Victor Avila, was traveling from Laredo, Texas to Mexico City when they encountered a high-speed pursuit by 2 SUVs. The vehicles, driving aggressively, eventually forced the agents off the road. As the agents tried to explain that they were U.S. diplomats, the gunmen, armed with rifles, shot at them, critically wounding them. Despite being gravely injured, Jamie managed to drive the car away before succumbing to his injuries. Victor, although shot twice in the leg, survived and later received medical treatment in Houston. The attackers were reportedly part of Los Zetas, but it remains unclear whether they acted independently or had coordinated the ambush with the intent of targeting American agents. Some of the assailants claimed to have mistaken the agents for members of a rival cartel. However, the agents had clearly identified themselves as U.S. diplomats before the gunfire erupted, raising suspicions that the attack was deliberate. The weapon used to kill Jaime was traced back to a gun purchased illegally through Operation Fast and Furious, a controversial U.S. Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms operation. This discovery led to further debates about U.S. involvement in the smuggling of weapons into Mexico and the safety of American agents operating in the country. In the aftermath, the investigation led to the capture of the perpetrators, including Jesus Enrique Rejon Aguilar, a high-ranking member of Los Zetas. Next, we have U.S. agents who were shot at the U.S.-Mexico border. Unknown U.S. agents. U.S. Border Patrol agents came under fire in a violent encounter with cartel gunmen as the cartels attempted to smuggle illegal migrants across the U.S.-Mexico border. The confrontation occurred near Fronton, Texas, close to the Rio Grande, where authorities released drone footage showing armed men moving along the riverbank. The gunmen, suspected cartel operatives, had been attempting to cross the border with a group of migrants seeking to enter the U.S. from Mexico. The incident escalated when the gunmen opened fire on U.S. agents. While agents returned fire, there were a few reported serious injuries on either side. Border Patrol reported the shots fired at approximately 1:29 p.m. on January 27, 2025, and confirmed that the situation remained active. As tensions surged, Texas Department of Public Safety officers responded, assisted by drones capturing footage of the gunmen fleeing into Mexico, apparently seeking refuge on an island between the U.S. and Mexico. This violent exchange highlights the escalating dangers along the U.S.-Mexico border, especially as cartels act in more brazen and direct ways. Under the leadership of President Donald Trump, the border has seen a significant increase in military and law enforcement presence, as the administration declared a national emergency and sent additional troops to combat illegal migration and cartel activities. Trump also signed 21 executive orders aimed at increasing border security, including labeling cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. Governor Greg Abbott of Texas responded by deploying over 400 soldiers to assist in border protection, while additional measures, such as river buoys, were placed to deter migrant crossings. Meanwhile, Mexico has reluctantly agreed to accept more deported migrants, a reversal from earlier policies. Unlike the incident at the U.S.-Mexico border, this next case involves two young soldiers who died in a helicopter crash due to cartel involvement: Casey N. Frankowski and John Gracia. On March 8, 2024, two U.S. Army National Guard soldiers tragically lost their lives in a helicopter crash near the U.S.-Mexico border in La Grula, Texas. Chief Warrant Officer Casey N. Frankowski from Rensselaer, New York, and Chief Warrant Officer John Gracia from Schenectady, New York, were conducting an aerial reconnaissance mission as part of the federal border mission when their UEH-72 Lakota helicopter went down. The crash, which occurred in the rural Rio Grande Valley, also claimed the life of a Border Patrol agent whose identity has not been released. Another passenger, identified as Jacob Pratt, survived the crash, although he sustained injuries. Casey and John were both part of the 1st Battalion, 244th Aviation Regiment, stationed with Detachment 2, and were participating in Joint Task Force North operations, separate from Texas's own border security efforts. This mission, aimed at combating cartel activity and illegal crossings, has been a priority for the New York National Guard for nearly a decade. The UH-72 Lakota helicopter, owned by the District of Columbia National Guard, was conducting surveillance over the region when it went down. The exact cause of the crash is still under investigation, with authorities suspecting a Mexican cartel's involvement. Both Casey and John were highly decorated members of the National Guard. Casey had served in Kuwait in 2018 and received numerous honors, including the National Defense Service Medal and the Global War on Terrorism Service Medal. John had also served in Kuwait in 2013 and had later been involved in the state's response to the pandemic, earning similar honors throughout his service. Moving on, we have U.S. agents who were murdered in a cartel operation in Mexico. Unknown U.S. agents. In a horrific ambush in the Mexican state of Michoacan, more than a dozen police officers and 9 U.S. agents were killed in an attack attributed to cartel gunmen. The violence marks a deadly escalation in cartel-related activity in 2019. The state police officers arrived in the town of El Aguaje in the Aguililla municipality to execute a warrant when they were ambushed by heavily armed civilians. The attackers opened fire, killing 14 officers, while others were wounded and their vehicles set ablaze. Photos of the aftermath surfaced on social media, showing police vehicles riddled with bullets and burning in the middle of a highway. Authorities also discovered banners allegedly signed by the Jalisco New Generation cartel, warning the police not to support rival groups, particularly Los Viagras. Although the authenticity of the banners remains under investigation, experts believe the CJAng is deeply entrenched in this area of the country and has a history of targeting law enforcement. Following the attack, federal and state security forces reinforced the area, setting up checkpoints in search of the assailants. The attack, one of the bloodiest against security forces including U.S. agents, since President Andrés Manuel López Obrador's inauguration, occurred just hours after he made statements about combating the country's high murder rate. His government has deployed the National Guard, a militarized police force, to key hotspots, but the violence indicates that the government's efforts were struggling to stem the tide of drug cartel violence. Next, we have a U.S. cop who was hiking when cartel members suddenly confronted him and subjected him to a brutal attack. Unknown cop. This brutal attack by suspected cartel members left a former U.S. cop injured while exploring the Jacumba Wilderness, located near the U.S.-Mexico border in San Diego County. According to the U.S. Border Patrol's El Centro sector, the incident occurred around noon when a group of U.S. citizens was hiking in the remote wilderness area straddling the border between San Diego and Imperial counties. Officials reported that two armed individuals, believed to be cartel members, confronted the hikers. The gunmen, carrying handguns, were roughly 1,000 yards inside U.S. territory when they approached two of the hikers, shouting commands in Spanish. When the hikers failed to respond, the gunmen escalated the situation by firing shots in the air, then striking one of the hikers in the leg with a bullet after the hikers attempted to escape. The attack was a terrifying reminder of the increasing cartel violence spilling over the border into the United States. As the victims feared they would be kidnapped, Border Patrol agents swiftly responded to the scene, successfully evacuating the hikers and neutralizing the threat. The injured former cop is expected to make a full recovery. In the aftermath, Border Patrol's elite Border Patrol tactical unit flooded the area with agents and marksmen, underscoring the severity of the situation. The Border Patrol issued a clear warning to the cartels, stating, "These cartels think they can bring their war to American soil. Let this serve as a warning. The El Centro sector will not stand idly by." Unlike the lucky cop who survived, this next U.S. soldier met a terrifying death in Mexico. Jack Carter Road. 3 tourists, including U.S. soldier Jack Carter Road, were tragically found dead in Mexico, their bodies shot in the head and dumped in a well. The victims, Jack and Australian brothers Jake and Callum Robinson, disappeared while on a surfing trip in Ensenada on April 27, 2024. Officials believe the attack occurred when the group tried to stop thieves from stealing their pickup truck. The bodies of the 3 men were discovered on May 5th in a 4-meter deep well in the town of Santo Tomas, roughly 6 kilometers from the site of the attack. The discovery was made after the men's relatives traveled to Mexico to assist local authorities. Nearby, a burnt-out pickup truck and abandoned tents were found, along with a phone belonging to one of the victims. The victims were reportedly confronted by 2 armed individuals who intended to steal the vehicle for its tires. When the tourists resisted, the attackers shot them in cold blood. The murder of the 3 men, including Jack, has left their families devastated. Jack had recently proposed to his partner, and tributes poured in from his friends and family, highlighting his generosity and kindness. Local authorities in Baja California, one of Mexico's most violent states, have arrested 2 men and a woman in connection to the killings. One man, who has a prior criminal record, has been charged with forced disappearance. This tragedy has sparked outrage in the Ensenada region, historically a popular and safer destination for U.S. tourists. Local surfers held a vigil to honor the victims, with signs demanding safer beaches. Like Jack, this next police couple will be brutally murdered in Mexico for no apparent reason inside their pickup truck. Rafael and Gloria Cardona. An American police couple was tragically executed while on vacation in the western Mexican state of Michoacan. Rafael Cardona and his wife Gloria Cardona were traveling in their pickup truck in the municipality of Angamacurito when they were ambushed by gunfire. Both were shot and killed in the attack, which occurred just blocks away from their residence. Rafael was rushed to a nearby hospital in Puruandiro, but later succumbed to his injuries. Gloria was declared dead at the scene. The couple had arrived in Mexico on November 30th, 2024, to celebrate the holidays with family. They were close relatives of local officials, with Rafael's sister Lucy Cardona serving as the director of the National System for Integral Family Development in the municipality. The attack remains a mystery, with no clear motive for the execution. The Michoacan State Attorney General's office is leading the investigation, but has not made any arrests as of yet. The U.S. Department of State has acknowledged the deaths and is offering consular assistance if needed. A travel advisory issued by the Department of State has warned Americans against visiting Michoacan, citing widespread crime and the presence of violent drug cartels, including Familia Michoacana, the Sinaloa Cartel, and the Jalisco New Generation Cartel. In 2023, Michoacan saw over 1,300 murders, and the state has become infamous for its cartel-driven violence. Since Mexico's war on drugs began in 2006, more than 450,000 people have been killed, with little resolution in sight. Despite the ongoing violence, President Claudia Sheinbaum has continued the hugs not bullets policy of her predecessor, President Andrés Manuel López Obrador, focusing on social strategies instead of direct confrontations with cartels. Moving on, we have one of the most infamous U.S. operations against Mexican cartels, which resulted in the deaths of 6 Drug Enforcement Administration agents: John, Dennis, Billy, Rick, Finley, and Clyde. 6 U.S. DEA agents and 3 Peruvians tragically lost their lives in a plane crash during a routine anti-drug operation in the Peruvian Andes. On May 20th, a twin-engine Cessna Caravan, part of the U.S.-led Operation Snowcap, crashed into Huacranacro Mountain near Villcocha, located about 70 miles northeast of Lima. The 9 victims were conducting surveillance as part of an ongoing effort to locate and destroy drug laboratories in Peru and Bolivia. Among the deceased was 36-year-old DEA agent Rick Finley, who had been with the agency's Detroit office for 5 years. Also on board were pilots Captain John Knapp, Dennis Eilep, and Billy McDonald, mechanic John Van Zant, and U.S. Embassy employee Clyde Bayless. The 3 Peruvians on board were identified as Mario Matalana, Hugo Samanes Castaneda, and Raul Quintana Orihuela. The plane was operating under Operation Snowcap, a joint mission between the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration and the governments of Peru and Bolivia to combat drug trafficking in the region. Experts reported that the engine on the Cessna shut down just before the crash. As a result, air traffic controllers in Huánuco lost contact with the plane shortly before it went down, minutes after the crew sent an emergency call. While it was later confirmed that cartel involvement was behind the issue, the full details remain undisclosed. The plane had taken off from Tingo Maria in the Amazon region and was en route to Lima, conducting reconnaissance over the drug-producing Upper Huallaga Valley. The crash site was near the town of Pacaraos in Chancay Province, around 65 miles northeast of Lima. If you enjoyed watching this video, then keep exploring by clicking on any of the cards on your screen for more exciting videos like this.